Hello and welcome to the Whippet.net video on APIs. So in this video, what we're going to do is just basically give you a high-level overview of what an API is, how it works with software development, and then a couple of examples of APIs that are currently used in today's development world. So Brian, tell me what an API is.
An API is an application program interface. It's essentially software that's written so that you can interact with other software. It's language independent. It basically allows you to extend the functionality of how you interact with an application by allowing you as a developer to code against exposed components of the software that you want to work with.
Some types of APIs are external libraries such as DLLs. There's also other objects like COM and ActiveX, which are installed on the computer that's running the software, and web services, which are remote APIs.
In the case of external libraries, this would be an executable file that contains importable instructions. This can be imported into a program to inherit functionality. So this would be something like a DLL on a computer that can be consumed by a program that you're writing, for example, so that you can acquire that functionality into your program.
And we're not going to really get too deep into this, but later on when we start running libraries, you'll see how this works. So basically when you write a DLL program, which is a class program, you basically just define interfaces that are publicly available to external software. They're also formatted in such a way that when you import the DLL, you can specify which internal functions that you want to use, and then the software will just go out and get them and start creating the instances and objects that are associated with that. So next we'll talk about COM, which is Component Object Model. Now COM is used in so many different ways, it's really kind of hard to pinpoint every single way to use it, but just kind of as a general overview, it's a language-independent method of sharing objects. Typically COM objects are something that are installed on a computer. A really good example of a COM object is when you install Microsoft Office or when you install OpenOffice, it throws some libraries on your computer that you can use programmatically create Excel spreadsheets or Word documents, or even use, like for example, the OpenOffice API, you can use its ability to convert Word documents into PDFs in your own programs just by simply installing OpenOffice on the computer.
So in the case of Microsoft Office, a Word document is essentially an object model. The Word document itself is represented within the COM object as an object. Part of that object has functionality like make the font bold, make the font a certain size at a certain location, add a page, save the file as something on the file system.
Convert the file to something.
Right.
Yep.
So all of those functions and all that functionality is written into the object model of a Word document. So when you write a program, let's say it's in Perl or in any language, and you create an instance of that object in your program, you can call those functions to save that file you're working with and write to that file through your program.
The QtFTP API, I mention this because I think it's kind of cool. Like, it allows you to easily access like SFTP and FTPS stuff, so you can just throw that in your program without having to write any of that yourself.
ActiveX is similar to COM, but it utilizes OLE, or OLE, Object Linking and Embedding. OLE is a technology that embeds a document into another object, or an object in an object. So for example, in rich text files, a long time ago, you would commonly see it by putting a bitmap in the rich text file. It would be a form of using OLE. So instead of the rich text file format knowing how to support and display a bitmap, it's leveraging other functionality that the system understands to display the bitmap. This is used in a lot of other ways today still.
Yeah, like so a lot of websites will use ActiveX controls, and you'll know it too because when you go to a website, like when you go to like WebEx or those types of websites where you're sharing your desktop, that's an ActiveX object. When you go to the website and you haven't been there before, it's going to pop up and say, you need to install this control to use this website. And what they're actually doing is installing a piece of software on your computer that the HTML document embeds within itself. So this whole embedding a document inside of an object, if you look at the HTML code has an object type of, and then it actually calls the ActiveX control from the HTML document to embed it inside that program.
Right, which is effectively asking your computer how to handle that file format. Mm-hmm. And since the ActiveX control installed that library on your system, now your system knows how to use it, which is also why ActiveX is not necessarily the most secure means of doing things over the internet.
ActiveX has been under scrutiny over the last, 8 years or something like that.
Because it's effectively, by way of a browser, allowing you to install directly into your COM layer of your operating system.
Yeah. It's also a good way for transmitting viruses and that kind of stuff as well. Yeah. So when you accept an ActiveX control, be sure that you trust the source that it's coming from. So next we're going to talk about web services. It's basically just using URLs and a method of posting data to a web server to retrieve either text, XML, or binary data as a result that's inserted into a program. Now, you can use web services in so many ways. I mean, there's tons of ways you can use them. You can import them as references into programs. You can have a program that has a piece of code that actually sends data to a web service. Like, there's just so many different ways that you can use a web service. Like in today's world, simple things like getting a stock quote you can use as a web service. You can even send a document to a web service and have it respond with a different type of document for conversions. I mean, there's just so many ways you can use them.
And as mobile applications become more popular, web services also become more popular. If you put all of your functionality of an application in a web service, the only thing that you have to develop on a mobile device is the front end for it.
Yep.
So the front end is just a basic user interface with which to access the data that's provided by a web service.
And as Brian made a really good point that web services, Brian and I, we're both in the field. We see this are on a huge growth right now. The demand for web services is very high. And like Brian just mentioned, you don't really have to put too much work into expanding your application into other platforms because there is that centralized processing model, which is the service that provides the data.
So here are a few API examples. One is the Google Maps API. So if you have a website and you want to embed a Google Map into your website, you're essentially calling the Google Map API in order to do that. Another one is the Adobe Acrobat API. A lot of people do this for the creation and displays of PDFs and other programs. So if you write a program and within it you want to display some informational PDFs, then you might call the Adobe Acrobat API and as a requirement force the user to install something like Adobe Reader before they install your program so that you can leverage the Adobe Reader functionality of displaying the PDF in your program. Another one is Microsoft Office, like we were talking before, if you want to programmatically generate Excel files or if you want to programmatically fill out Word documents. Other API examples is applications that use embedded Flickr streams, or the Facebook API examples are like the throw a Hillary Clinton at somebody on Facebook applications or like Bejeweled, all leverage the Facebook API.
There's one that we don't have on this list that I want to mention because I love it, and that's the GhostScript API.
Oh, yeah.
For those guys out there that are doing document manipulation, nothing's better.
Absolutely.